I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Everdell Farshore from Starling Games. Everdell Farshore is the newest line in the Everdell series from Starling Games, first brought to you with Everdell, then like 17 expansions, and then we had my first Everdell, if I recall correctly, my little Everdell for an Everdell accessible game for kids, and now we have Everdell Farshore, which seems like a reboot to the series. Not necessarily a reboot to like get rid of the original Everdell. Original Everdell still stands on its own, and I will of course talk about my thoughts of one versus the other in my final thoughts. With that, let's talk about what Everdell is, and it's always tricky to approach these kinds of reviews because do I talk about Everdell from the stance of having no idea what it is, or do I try to compare it to the original? So I'm going to go with a little bit of both. I'll go into what Everdell is, what Everdell Farshore is, how it operates, I'll talk about the differences, and then of course I'll talk about my opinions. Everdell Farshore is a tableau building game. In this game, you're going to be, and I should say, if you just want to hear the differences, just jump to the timestamp because otherwise this is going to be a lot of information you already know. In Everdell Farshore, you're going to be building out a tableau. You're going to be specifically building out a 15-card tableau over here, where as you go ahead and build and play cards, you'll get various effects, but you can have a maximum of 15 cards, and you're doing so across 4 seasons. In the game, basically every single turn has one of 2 primary actions, and then a third occasional action you'll take, well, 3 times in the game. The actions you can take are playing a card, where you'll pay the resources on the card. So you'll look over here, you'll pay the resources on the side here from these various piles full of resources. You'll play the card, you'll resolve its effect, which we'll talk about shortly, and that's basically how a card play goes. Alternatively, you'll place a worker. You're going to start the game with 2 workers, and every single season you're going to unlock more workers, but you can place a worker down into any number of different locations, from the shore over here, placing it down and gathering 3 wood, for example, or alternatively some of these island locations, which will mix up game to game, or some of these alternative locations as well. So you're placing a worker or playing a card in the game. Additionally, as an occasional action, you can reset for the next season. You can recall your workers, and you can go ahead and trigger any seasonal effects over here when you move to summer, when you move from spring to summer to fall. Each time you switch up seasons, there'll be a few effects, including activating some of your cards depending on those cards as you go through it. And so the game has 4 seasons. You're going to start off in winter, move to spring, then summer, then fall. In each season, you'll unlock additional workers. You'll have various things you get between seasons, and meanwhile, you're just trying to build up your resources in the game in order to be able to build out your cards, to build your tableau, and to hopefully get as many points as possible. Now, you'll get points from a lot of things in this game. You'll get points from the cards themselves. Each card has a point value to the right over here. That's going to be how many cards the points are worth. Additionally, as your ships move around the board, you're going to get points depending on where your ship ends up to a maximum of 60 points. And the way your ships move is some cards are going to help you move ships, but also you're going to have these tokens over here. And these tokens, as you match a ship that you play, so whenever you play a card, let's say for example over here, this is a terrible example, but let's use this over here. Over here, if I build this common construction right now, I'll pay the cards, I'll pay the cost over here. This card, as you can see over here, is a common construction. We have a few different card symbols on them. We have constructions and we have critters. We have commons and we have uniques. And we have specific types of cards, 5 types of cards you can have over here. And as you build certain types of cards, if I built that symbol of card over there, or a construction, I would move my ship. And if I did both at the same time, meaning a construction that is that symbol, then I would move my ship twice. In this case, I only have 1 over here. So for example, let's say I play the shipwreck. The shipwreck is both a construction and that. If you play the shipwreck, you'll go ahead and move your ship twice along these little markers over here, gathering treasure chests as you cross them, and treasure chests are worth either 2 points or alternatively count as a wild resource. So trying to match these over here is important, and these will shift up every single season, although it's important to note a thing that throws people off in Everdell is the fact that you don't necessarily move to the next season at the same time. Players can activate their next season at different times, and you're going to switch that up whenever the last player moves to the next season. So that's going to be another way you get points, moving your ship around the board over here. Many cards on them will give you various points. I don't know if there are any over here. None of these cards over here do so, but there's a ton of cards that will do various things that will give you points as you play them, and you want to be mindful of those. You're also going to get points for these over here. These are achievements that you're going to go ahead and gather that as you play certain cards types, you may have 3 of these cards, or 4 of the green cards, or 1 card of each type. And when you place a worker down over here, and you have the requisite requirements over here, you can take the top available one over here, and these range in value from 2 to 1 to 1 to 0, and the way these score is you get points equal to the number, the shells you have on them, multiplied by the number of achievements you have. So for example, if you were really ambitious and you got all of the 2s, if you got all these 2s before they shift down to the 1s below it, if you got all the 2s, you'd have 12, because 6 times 2, 12 times 6, or 72 points is the maximum you can get from here. More typically, you're looking at anywhere from, 10 to 30 points, depending on how well you do on the achievement. achievements. So you're trying to get achievements, you're trying to get shells, you're trying to get these over here. You're also trying to get purple cards. Each card has a type, which we haven't talked about yet a lot, but purple cards are going to score you points. In addition to the points on the card, they'll score you points as the ability that they do is also going to give you points, which is a good time to talk about card types in the game, because there's 5 primary card types. The card types you have, you're going to have green cards over here. These cards will give you their effect when you play them, but they'll also re-trigger when you move to spring and when you move to fall. So these cards will activate possibly 3 times per game if you play them early on. You're going to have these single-use cards, which are these over here, the ones, this symbol over here is going to be a single-use card. You simply activate the ability as you do so. These blue cards are going to give you benefits depending on what you do. So for example, you can gain one of these resources after you play a critter, although you are limited to activating 1 blue card per action that you take. Then there's finally going to be red cards. Red cards over here. Red cards are going to give you a placement location, where you can place a worker onto a location, just your own locations. You cannot do it on your opponent's. But if I build the Abbey, then I'll have an additional place to place my workers in the game, giving me something else that I can do that others cannot do. Those are the 5 card types. A resource generating greens, the blues that give you an activation, the grays that are simply a one-time resource, the reds that give you a location, and the purple that are point scoring in the game. Those are going to be the core things you're doing as far as the card types in the game. So once again, throughout the course of the game, you're gathering resources. You're gathering those resources so you can play cards. You're playing cards into the tableau to build out your tableau to get more things. You're going to have various locations you can go to. You can go here to discard cards to gain resources. You can go over here to discard any number of cards, then draw up to your handler from the game. You can also, an important thing is you can always build from the bay. This bay area, whenever you have cards, you can build cards from your hand, or you can build from the bay. These are a common area, and so when you draw, you can either draw from the deck, or you can draw from the bay. The main benefit of drawing from the bay is if you want that one card that you're worried someone else is going to build, you can go ahead and put it to your hand so that nobody else can get it, and you'll put out a new card, and if it matches any of the card types, like you can see over here, the market, then you'll lay it over so you don't have duplicate cards in the bay area. And that's primarily what's happening as you play through Everdell Farshore. The basic idea of the game, and there's a few other side things, we're not getting into every detail, but the basic idea of the game is you are going to be going ahead and taking actions to place workers and to play cards. Whenever you place workers and play cards, you're ideally getting some sort of benefit, either more resources or some element of tableau building. You're doing so to ideally build the best combination of 15 cards that will score you as many points as possible. You're going to get points from your cards, points from your purple cards, points from these achievements over here, points from how far and how well you moved your boat around the track, points from any of these tokens that are worth 2 points each, or alternatively a wild resource, so you have to try to weigh up what's the benefit. If I trade in two of these over here, will I get at least 4 points out of it? Because if not, I should have just kept the tokens. And you're trying to do that more efficiently than other players as you play through Everdell Farshore. As far as differences, oh wait, one important thing. Before you dive into differences, there's also these little anchor mechanism. Every player starts with 3 anchors in the game, and these anchors, you can place these on a matching construction in order to place a matching critter. For example, over here I have this tumbler construction area over here. If I want to build a critter for free, so let's say I want to build this sailmaker over here, because it shares the same type of this construction and it's a critter, I can place an anchor onto the construction to place this critter for free, and I can do that 3 times throughout the course of the game. Which from there is a good time to dive into the differences between Everdell and Everdell Farshore. I'm going to be focusing on the main ones, not every little aspect to them, but as far as the differences go, if you're jumping here from whatever timestamp or whatever, there's a few differences to go through. The first is you're going to notice this addition of the boat track around the board. This is something completely new to Everdell Farshore, the idea that you have a boat that's slowly moving as you flip over these tokens, and it's going to give you points as well as giving you various treasure resources, which are worth, again, more points, or alternatively, wild resources in the game. That's something completely new that was not present in Everdell. You're going to see the decks are obviously completely readjusted. They're just new cards, new abilities to whatever degree they're tweaked. There's some degrees of similarities to some of the things you'll see in Everdell, but just an entirely new deck of cards. This idea over here, which ties into how the boat moves, that's obviously new. The way the achievements work in the sense that they multiply against themselves, that's going to be a new change as well. These anchors, previously in Everdell, you'd have specific constructions that would give you a free build for a character. So if you had this particular building, you could build that exact critter, which was a lot of fun to go through, but also has the downside that as you add more cards to the game, it gets harder and harder to manage, making sure that you can actually build everything you want. These anchors, rather than giving you that complete freedom of, hey, I can have 5 constructions that match 5 critters and get a lot of freedom in play, you just have 3 anchors 3 times per game. You can use an anchor to build a critter of the same type for free, so it opens up the game to a little bit more the ability to grow within the system without being confined to that necessity to ensure that card balance, but it gives you those anchors instead of that element of a specific construction tying into a specific critter. You're also going to have that meeple on the boat instead of the 2 meeples in Autumn, I believe, if I recall correctly. You're going to have the cards that overlay onto the bay. So you're going to have duplicates of cards being played onto the bay, which is going to give you that aspect of a clearer meadow area. In this case, it's a bay instead of the meadow, but it's going to give you that as well. And I think those are the primary differences that I feel as I go through the game. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I'm missing as far as the main differences. I'd say primarily the anchors, the boats, the may, and the card draw. We have the lookout location that let you draw back up to your hand side. So there's more areas to be able to just completely get back the cards you need or have more card flexibility in the game. And I think those are the main differences. And then, of course, we have this lighthouse situation. I guess it's a lighthouse instead of the giant tree from Everdell. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into my review, starting off with... I don't know how to approach this review. Normally I do a review in terms of what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, but I think with this being a newer version of Everdell, it's hard to not talk about this game without the context of Everdell. And so I'm going to talk about this game as somebody who is a huge fan of Everdell. I'm going to try to talk about this game. I love Everdell. Everdell to me is a 5 out of 5 game. It's a game that the first time I played it, I got rid of it. I played it, I really liked it, but I got rid of it. And I think the reason I got rid of it was because the meta was a fascinating, not the meta, your card tableau was a fascinating thing to build up. When you first go through that first season of the game, and you manage to play maybe 1 or 2 cards before you move into spring, it feels incredibly tight and punishing. But then you start getting a lot more done. By the time you hit the end game, you've almost certainly played out your 15 cards, and so it's a constant balance of not doing too many cheap cards because then you'll lose out in points, but if you don't build up an economy, you won't have the resources you need, and so there's a lot of balancing in the game. It's trying to figure out how to work towards your engine and when do you trade in? Do I trade in an anchor early game in order to be able to get that critter and play quickly, which means I can benefit from it more? Alternatively, if I wait till later in the game, I can trade it in for a critter that'll cost 4 berries to play instead of just 2 berries, and so maybe that's a better trade-off there. There's a lot of trade-off in the game as you try to manage how your economy works, and it feels very tight and punishing to play through. And so that first time I played, there was that disparate aspect of unsure how I felt about it. But then when I played it more, I got it back, I had second thoughts, I got back Everdell, I played it more, and I really enjoyed it quite a bit as I dove into it more and more and more, and had a lot of fun with the system. And there's so many expansions for the system. There's like 6 expansions, 5 expansions, a lot of expansions, not even including promo packs. The system grows a lot, and grows in terms of your table space, in terms of the bird, in terms of everything you're doing. Everdell just takes up a lot. It takes up a lot of space, a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of just everything in Everdell. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's a great game that I really recommend and I think is absolutely amazing. And for all that's going on within the system, they've done a great job of making it grow and just feel like a good system that is incredibly rewarding. And so I love Everdell. I'm walking through this review as a fan of Everdell, and that has pros and cons to it. I find that when you have expectations for a game, if the new version of the game exceeds the old version, then it's even more exciting. Because you have that picture in your mind of what the old game is, and the new version of it is just better, and it really just... Recently I reviewed Cyclades, and Cyclades, the Legendary Edition, and that was to me a more definitive, better version of Cyclades, and that was such an easy game to love and resonate with and connect with. But then the flip side is you have games like Terraforming Mars, Ares Expedition, where I love Terraforming Mars, and I played Ares Expedition, and I like Ares Expedition, but it wasn't Terraforming Mars, and so there's that aspect of it's not as good. It doesn't live up to its predecessor, and so it's always tricky balancing how you feel about a new version of a game system you love. And like I said already, Everdell is a 5 out of 5 for me. It's one of those games, and there's only like 30 or 40 games in my collection that are 5 out of 5. And from the 1,000 plus games I've played, more than 1,000, from the 1,500 games or so I've played in my life, there's like 30 or 40 games I give a 5 out of 5 to, and Everdell is one of them. And I like Everdell Farshore. I like it a lot. And I think some of the changes they've made are probably a change for the better compared to Everdell. But I think overall I prefer Everdell. Everdell Farshore is trying this, and I think it has a lot of things to speak for it. That anchor aspect over here, the idea that you play these anchors, and you have 3 anchors across the course of the game, that's less exciting than the idea of having a matching construction and critter. I think it's potentially better balanced, and I think it lets you grow the system better. If you play through some of the expansions of Everdell, you'll have cards that connect with any card, but those aren't across the board. You have some cards that connect with any card, and some that specifically match. And I think the excitement of specifically matching things is better. Not necessarily more balanced, but it's more fun. It gives you that sense of adventure that you found something. When you have 4 or 5 cards in your area that you've built out because you managed to connect those matching critters and constructions, there's more excitement to that. And again, this might be more balanced, and these metal anchors are certainly very nice, but I don't know if it's necessarily better. I think they tried to recapture the magic of the squishy berries from Everdell by having 5 or 6 unique resources, and the problem is I think it's too much. I think these resources have like 5 or 6 different textures and types, and it doesn't feel as coherent as far as the ecosystem. There are some nice resources. I like these little mushrooms. I like these little these tokens over here. I like a lot of the tokens, but there's too many. The feel of the shells, the small squishiness of the seaweed. There's a little bit too many different types and textures of resources that ends up feeling a little bit more disparate as opposed to the cutesiness that I want. Now, again, it's great. Don't get me wrong. Compared to many games, it's great. But I don't think it necessarily captures the magic quite as well. I like the ship track. The ship track as you go around the board, I like that a lot. It gives you access to more resources, the decision point of whether they're worth points or resources, and then try and take advantage of how to match cards to this, which is a whole new puzzle that I really do enjoy. I think I don't love the fact that these ships are like gigantic and trying to figure out exactly how you match them up, and it's easy to lose track of where a ship was. You have to try to be exactly mindful, and so this is a little tricky, but this small little complaint there. But I do think the ship track is a nice thing. In general, I think they've done some good things here, some good premises, some good ideas. I like the way the achievements blend off each other. I like the fact that as you go through the game, this meadow, this bay area is a little easier to keep clear because of the fact that you're going to be drawing cards from the bay and meadow as you shift seasons, because of the fact that you're going to be overlaying cards on top of similar cards, because of the fact that there's generally more card draw in the game, more ability to get your cards up as you need them. And so I think they did a good job of keeping the same systems while tweaking and adjusting things in ways that are overall improvements. I think some of the sense of magic around the theme of Everdell, or even that giant tree, which again, they're replicating with this lighthouse here. Maybe it's partially theme, maybe it's partially that critter construction. I really do like the critter construction aspect in Everdell a bit more. There's a lot of small tweaks here that I think Everdell Farshore feels like 95% the same as Everdell, with tweaks that are for the most part in the right direction, which is why I'm kind of torn on this one. Overall, I love Everdell as a system. I think it's not necessarily the right game for everyone in every way, but I think I love Everdell as a system. And I really, really like Everdell Farshore. To me, I think I'll go into final thoughts here. And this whole review has been, usually I'd have a whole format for my reviews, what I like, what I don't like, what I can see others not liking. It's just hard to really talk about a game on its own that has such a history for me. I think Everdell Farshore to me is a 4.5 out of 5. And I could see it going in either direction on that one. Like I said already, it's very hard to weigh up a game against its predecessor because it's both an amazing, incredible game, but also to me doesn't give that magic and excitement of when you find an amazing and incredible game. When you find an amazing, incredible game that builds off of, when you find, like, again, Cyclades Legendary, when a game builds off and improves upon the original, then it's like, wow, this thing I love just got better. Or when you find something new for the first time, there's that sense of discovery of, wow, look at this game I just found. In the case of Everdell Farshore, this is a really good game that feels really, really like that other really good game that I like, but there's some small tweaks and adjustments in both directions that I like one versus the other. I'm not prepared to get rid of Everdell Farshore. I think I want to hold on to this game. The question is, do I need Everdell and Everdell Farshore? Do you need Everdell and Everdell Farshore? And I don't think the answer is yes. I think Everdell Farshore to me feels the same enough for Everdell that I don't think there's necessarily room for both in your collection unless. Here's the unless. Everdell Farshore does some things differently, some things that I could argue are better, and some things that I feel take away a little bit of the magic from Everdell. And so to that end, if I were recommending one versus the other, I don't know which one I'd recommend. I know for me, I prefer Everdell, but objectively looking at some of the aspects of what Farshore does, I think it does tweak and improve some elements in a way that I think that I'd probably stick with recommending Everdell just out of a pure instinct, but it would be a very big toss-up as to which one I recommend. For me, part of the reason and benefit of this is that this way I kind of have two Everdells in my collection, at least for right now. I have Everdell Farshore when I simply want to introduce you to Everdell and simply want to play base game Everdell with somebody. I think I would pull out Everdell Farshore. And if I want to pull out a messy experience with multiple expansions to people who know the systems, I'd pull out Everdell with expansions. As I said, I think right now there's room for both. I'm also curious to see how Farshore develops. What additional expansions are they going to have for this? How are they going to build upon the system? Whenever you have a relaunch, sometimes it takes off and you add new expansions and you build off that as the new starting point. Sometimes you don't. It depends on the system. Again, we have Kingdom Builder and Winter Kingdom. We have Aeon's Trespass Odyssey and the new one that I always forget the name of. The new system within that, but I can't remember the name of it. There are so many games out there, so many game systems, and the choice of how to build and develop upon them is always fascinating, and I am curious to see where Everdell Farshore goes. For me, I really like Everdell Farshore. I easily recommend it, but I think push comes to shove, if I were recommending one versus the other, I'd recommend Everdell over Everdell Farshore, but again, it would be a very close call. And for me, Everdell is a 5 out of 5, and Farshore is a 4.5 out of 5. Both great games, tremendous games that I really enjoy, and it captures a lot of the magic of Everdell. And it could just be the fact that, to me, Everdell is what captured the magic of Everdell. That's the part I'm stuck on. The part I'm stuck on is I don't know if I like Everdell objectively better, or if Everdell captured the magic and Farshore just didn't build upon it enough further. It's a great game. It's just hard to fully gauge where it lines up for me because of those aspects. But it's definitely a great game, and one that I recommend. As far as other game recommendations, obviously Everdell is going to be first and foremost, and then alternatively there's my favorite tableau building game, Terraforming Mars, and then there's others in the genre that have done tremendously well, such as Wingspan and Earth and Ark Nova, all games that build heavily upon the card building system, which you build out a lot of cards into a system and try to have the cards play off and build off each other in the right way as you gather resources and optimize your point scoring across the course of the game. This is Everdell Farshore, a great game from Starling Games, the next in the Everdell series, and I'm curious to see how it holds up for everyone else. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.